we're really just tapping into the budget here. We're spending $30 on two 16-foot LED strips.
Yep.
Okay.
Watch out, Blizzard.
Butterscotch.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 143 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I'm a walking viral vector.
I'm Sam, and I'm also sick.
And today is March double dozen plus 3, 20 great teen.
Yep.
Right.
Now, before we get
27, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, before we get started, we have a warning. Anything could happen on this show. There will be profanity, and then we'll talk about adult-themed things. Like
theme parks,
offices,
bars,
cubicles.
Yep.
Those kinds of, such
mortgages,
such
General
items.
sense of ennui.
Yep.
Mortgage. All right. So what happened this past week? Well, Crashlands coming to Switch.
Yeah, that's a big
For those of you
thing.
who couldn't understand what I said, Crashlands is coming to the Switch.
So it's the Nintendo Switch. That's Nintendo's new console. For those who somehow are not familiar, but listening to
It's been around for a year or so.
And things been selling like hotcakes on there. So we're really excited to get on the platform and see what we can do.
See
And the
if
most
we
exciting
will
thing
sell like hotcakes. Who knows?
is that there's not actually many crafting games on there right now.
Yeah.
So our usual competition, the games that everyone's like, oh, you guys are just one of those, not even on the platform yet. So we're going to see if we get on there before them, because that might be very good for us.
Well, something we noticed was if you look at the top performing indie games on the Switch, every single one of them is in a different genre, which means
is missing.
every genre has a winner, and there is no crafting genre on there yet.
Yep.
So
And I think almost in all cases, the first one to get there is the winner.
it's usually how it works.
So
we're gonna-
hopefully we get that.
Yeah, we're going to put some gas on that. We have a few little wrinkles to get figured out, but we already have it working, actually, on the Switch.
It's working, but it's not following the rules.
Correct. So, and this is part of the process called certification that you have to go through to get your game put onto something like a console. And essentially what you do is you have to go through this big rule book. It's kind of getting cleared by the FDA to be able to sell your stuff, right?
Yeah, or like when an airplane's about to take off and they just have to check all those boxes. You know?
Yeah.
Except
Like we have fuel.
Or it's
People
kinda
are
like-
on board.
Or it's kind of like when you're baking and then you put things through a sieve or whatever, you know, and then it kind of like sprinkles out onto, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah, no, exactly.
Somehow it's exactly
It's
like
very much similar.
So we got a few hoops to jump through, but our
it's kind of like
hooping
hula
skills-
hooping.
How did you go there? But our hula skills have gotten very good over the last couple of years. So we're hoping it'll be a relatively smooth ride to kind of get those things figured out. So I don't know how long it's going to be, but
I figure it'll take 10, probably 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
yes,
and then
max.
and then we will wait for 10 to 15 months or years,
Yeah, we will be getting it out this year sometime, but
presumably.
Yeah, we
That's what we
basically
said,
we have two things to wait on. So one is so GameMaker announced their official support for Switch 2 weeks ago, but it's not actually out yet. It comes out it's I guess expected to come out this summer. So who knows what that means? Because as we all know, plans fail.
Plans
So
are bad.
Who knows? But we're hoping that we might be able to get some, I don't know, special access or something, so that if it's basically done and we can just work around some bugs, then they'll let us.
Yeah.
Who knows? So to wait on that, and then the cert process itself, even if we do everything right, still takes 30 days. In best case scenario, and this is true for any platform or any console, which does kind of raise an interesting challenge that we now have to deal with for Crashlands, and would have to deal with for any game that we're launching on consoles also. Which is that now it's very hard to put out an update and make sure that everybody has the update out at the same time.
I don't know what the follow-on process is once you're already on the platform.
I'm pretty sure you go through cert for every update.
But is there like a smaller cert?
I would assume that there's something. We have literally no
We've
idea.
never done it before. It's going to be very educational.
So yeah, we'll let you guys know kind of what that's like, I guess.
Whatever
I've heard it's
we're
pretty
allowed
easy.
to say anyway.
Yeah, I've heard it's been relatively easy on Switch, which is thankful.
Relatively easy.
Relatively. So
Yeah, and that's something that we've been kind of mulling over, is that we've never been on a platform that's this locked down. So typically our experience has been Steam, Google Play, and iOS. We just publish, and then at most there's a couple days before the patch goes out. So we get to be pretty responsive to things, but this is different.
Yep.
And we don't know what that means and what the implications are for our workflow and everything else.
So the first goal is just to get it in there.
Get it in there.
ASAP so that we can deal with whatever the problems are.
Yeah, because the biggest thing that it means is that we have to have a much longer timeline between when we're done with a thing and when we can declare publicly that it's going to come out on a date. Because with that cert process, because it takes a long time, if we don't, if we fuck something up and don't get it through, then we might discover after 30 days that we have to fix something and then go back through cert again. So now it can take months instead of 0 time or days.
Yeah. And this is also, people often complain about day one patches.
Yeah.
Like this is why those exist.
Yeah. Because you don't want to go through cert again, or you went through cert again, have to wait, and then you can't put the new patch out until.
Right. Yep. And when you get the game into players' hands, you get a lot of feedback all of a sudden about things that are broken or whatever. And then you can try to get a rush order patch put in to fix those things. So it's definitely adds some weirdness to the process. Yep. So we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, we were at GDC last week, which
why Adam and I sound like dead people.
Yeah. Although we should also say, before moving on from the Switch, that I know a bunch of people were bummed out that we didn't tell them that Crashlands is coming to Switch.
We literally could not.
And including even our sound guys. So, so Fat Bard, we just couldn't tell anybody because it was all under NDA. So I know that kind of bummed some of you out, and we really wanted to tell you, but we just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about I can't remember if that was true with this particular NDA, but oftentimes with NDAs you'll see that even within the company, only the people who are directly involved in the project are allowed to know about it.
Yeah. Need to know basis.
They try to prevent leaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the more people know, the more likely it is that it'll get out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, so we went to GDC last week.
Yep.
And we got, so our primary goal going there was basically twofold. So Sam and I went there to give a couple talks to kind of just shake the tree and see what falls out, I guess. I don't know.
Shake the
You just talk at the tree.
Yep.
You just yell at it.
See if it bears any fruits,
Yeah, you just go and start barking at the tree.
Yep.
You
bark up it, I think.
Bark up it. So we did that. And then we also went to show Levelhead to see sort of what the response would be from our business partners and platform holders and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, and we don't care about publishers. So we're not shopping it around. It's just sort of it
just says, we have this.
Yeah. To show our usual platforms, kind of what we're working on and what might be basically asking you questions to them as far as what might be good things for us to keep in mind or any problems with the process they might see sort of down the road. So one of the big things with Levelhead, of course, is it's user generated content, which tends to make everybody very nervous.
Rightly.
So a big part of it is essentially, I guess overall the response was really, really good. In fact, it was probably the best response that we've ever gotten for one of our games, which is saying something because Crashlands did very, very well. But actually in all of our platformer holder meetings up until, after launching the game where it actually did, the numbers, the response tended to be kind of tepid. I think because it's too big of a damn game to be able to really concisely boil down into a point.
The mechanics build on themselves. We even had this problem when we demoed Crashlands at conventions. We had to
demo at all.
Yeah, we had to build custom abbreviated versions of the game with much faster crafting and like pets would hatch instantly, and we just gave you a bunch of stuff to really speed the process up, and it makes it less rewarding to play it because you're not earning or acquiring anything through legitimate means. But we still wanted to show the mechanics that usually would take 2-3 hours of gameplay to get to, right?
So the interesting thing with Levelhead is that it's just a graspable concept. And so we pared down our pitch for the platforms just to, again, make it very, very easy for everybody to understand what the hell we're doing with this game. And so the pitch ended up becoming a precision platformer that lets players become famous level designers. And that seemed to be a thing that really resonated with people really effectively. And then one of the funniest ones is that we had put in the week before we had gone to GDC. We were working really hard to polish everything up and get all the UIs done and make it so that you could actually sort of move through the entirety of the game without hitting one of these sort of hideous breakpoints.
Placeholders.
There previously. And so we really got everything polished up. But one of the biggest things was on Monday, we've been kicking around this idea of scaled objects. So as you start drawing, for example, putting down spikes in a level, if you put them in a 2x2 block, then they actually sort of slurp together and turn into one big spike. We talked about this for a while, but hadn't really put it on the priority queue. And then for whatever reason, Seth was I was going to do it.
We had been kind of noticing that with a lot of the screenshots and things that we were sharing, that when we wanted to have large sections of the level that are like covered in spikes or whatever, or blocks or whatever, it just becomes this kind of noisy shit piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Because it's just the same.
It just feels like a grid.
It's just the same thing over and over again. And in a game like Crashlands, we were able to get around this by the fact that all the tiles for the terrain and stuff flowed together very well and created a contiguous look. So if you ran across a big patch of, of grass or something, it looked fine because it looked like just one big patch of grass.
Instead of 3 dozen individual tiles stuck to each other.
Right. And we do have early screenshots of Crashlands where you could kind of see those and it just looked like shit.
Yeah. I mean, in general, it's very hard to make a tile, something that adheres to a grid, look good. So I think a good example that we made a lot of references to was Bastion, which if you go back and look at it, it is super grid based. But they did such a diversity in what the tiles look like. So they look like some are coming up, some are coming down. There's lots of different colors.
Scale. And that's actually scaling. This is actually one of the bigger points here is that from a general art direction standpoint, one of the things we failed to be able to capitalize on in Crashlands in particular was the idea of scale. And so what scale allows you to do is draw contrast between, say, the player as a person in the world and the relative size of things in the environment. So Crashlands, everything is constrained to a single grid square. And that's why you'll have, it sometimes just feels kind of weird. Like the world just kind of feels samey and small. And it's
so you're going to go chop a tree and it's exactly as tall as you are.
Yeah, can never be much taller than
chop some grass also as tall as you are.
And this is something actually early on that we had, I think probably in the first 6 to 12 months of development, we had come across and, I'd said, I really want to make this like this big thing. And we just couldn't figure out how to hack it because of some other constraints with how the world dissolves itself outside of the screen.
Right.
And so this is something that we've gotten working in our newer games generally. So Scuffle Buddies has this larger scaled object.
Scuffle Buddies has
huge.
We have so Scuffle Buddies isn't at the moment at least isn't using Perlin noise to generate its world. It's going to be like pre-hand built, which means we know we actually can pre-anticipate how big things are going to be and then spawn them or despawn them as they need to. Yep. And so we have things in Scuffle Buddies already that are like 6x6 tiles.
Oh, they're gigantic.
Just fucking huge.
But it's great because when you walk up near them, then you can feel a sense of scale that's just very different from the rest of the environment. So this all points down to this one idea, which we've been, I think, a little more keen on recently, which is just the idea of contrast and achieving contrast in the games. And so one of the favorite moments people have of Crashlands is the embiggening moment, where you basically evolve one of your creatures, and the thing that happens is just completely out of left field. Dubstep starts playing and screaming, and it's a lot of people's favorite events. As well as the fact that like the early boss fights, so the Bacon Weed Fairy is one of the first boss fights.
All of a sudden, it's a bullet hell.
and that contrast, that contrast makes you feel like the game has gotten, like breaks open the game world, where you realize that there's much more here than you had anticipated. So the thing with the scale and the scaling objects is hilarious because we built this whole editor. The thing, it works really, really well. It's really slick and has all these cool, like the path functions, the properties, all this stuff. No one gives a shit about any of it
because those are all familiar.
Until you put 4 spikes next to each other and they go boop and they turn into a bigger thing.
And then
everybody goes, ooh.
And then you put a few more spikes down and then boop, it merges to an even bigger spike ball.
And I think it does that thing. It basically does this sort of break open of the game world. People are like, what else?
What else could I merge together?
That? Yeah, which was funny too because we basically only did exactly that. But the next question people asked was, how big does it get?
How big does it get?
And now we have to ask ourselves that question.
How big does it get?
Because it may be huge.
Yeah, but it's also cool because the merging algorithm also works backwards. So if you have a 3x3 giant spike ball, and then you're like, I'm going to like reshape this thing. You can click on it and drag off, and it sort of pulverizes it back out into its component parts, and you can like take one little tiny spike ball out of it. And then it reshapes itself.
So there's all these really fluid system. Yeah. But I think the funny thing about it is that, and we had Seth had an inkling that this is what was going to happen because he showed his wife shortly after getting it done on Monday before GDC, and she's like, really cool. And that was the first time we'd gotten that response. And the thing is, the editor is an extremely robust piece of tech. So the thing is,
feels real good.
This is one of those things as a game dev you have to keep your eye on, which is that the things that you think are really cool, probably no one gives a shit about.
And the things that seem like they're not that big of a deal
are the big deal things.
I spent at least a week creating the path editor system and then updating all the game mechanics to get it so that things could move on moving platforms and everything. And then the merging of the spike balls was like a 3-hour project.
And that's the thing.
And now everybody's like, oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah, but I think it is true
We'll
that
take my money.
Yeah.
But I think it's true that the key to that is that people expect and even demand something like a path editor. Right?
Yeah, like things should
and they
be
demand,
moving.
yeah, the things should be moving, and they demand that if there are platforms that are moving, they know exactly how those should behave because they've played their platforms.
Yep.
And so if we don't deliver on that, that gets noticed. If we do deliver, nobody notices.
Yeah, it's like being a janitor. You know,
Yep.
if you don't
Yeah.
do your job, people will be upset.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, this is
it's
actually
all
like-
about
If you do it, nobody says a word.
it's all about delivering just some sort of new, interesting experience.
Well, it's actually something we've talked about a lot internally is sort of this realization that the most important part of the dev cycle is actually going to be, it's always just that last 10%.
Those
Because the
extra
truth
little
is,
things.
Yeah, getting
Not
all
in
the
time,
way up.
though. I'm pretty sure
No,
that's
not in
like
time.
80%.
Yeah, in terms of the actual overall product.
Yeah.
So that scaling thing, for example, is this tiny little piece that we just put on top, and it had to have the entire system in place to be able to put that there and have that be like a cool, useful thing. And we could just not, because it's not like required for the whole thing to work. But it's one of those things that your whole job actually as a dev is to get to that point where the things you add actually feel like additions as opposed to just you hitting the bar, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But this I think makes it even more challenging for people who have that compulsive desire to change projects all the time. Where, like, they'll start working on a project and they'll be like, nah, it's not really hitting what I want it to do. And then they jump ship and they start a new thing, sort of thinking that the idea is what's going to carry the project forward. When really it's what happens in these last bits, like this last chunk of development.
Yeah, essentially, like once you're done, I mean, this happened with Crashlands too. Like the story came out of literally the end of dev on the whole thing.
Yeah.
We only decided to do it once we had like most of the content in place and once we looked around the market. And so there's a lot of, and the beginning thing I think was actually much later in development as well. So
And that just happened on a whim.
That just happened because I was basically pulling a prank on Sam. I replaced the game's music with some Skrillex. And then I was
It was
like,
so
hey,
funny.
embiggen your creature. Oh, see what happens.
So I think it's an interesting point generally about like creative process stuff, right? Because a lot of people, you'll never make it to like the beginning is always really exciting because it's just exciting to start a project, right? And then actually the end, though, is the most exciting part because that's where you get to put those little bells and whistles on that really make it sort of.
And you're right next
its
to
own thing.
being able to show it to people.
Yeah, which is really cool.
In the middle just sucks a lot.
No, just so that, the middle grinds.
In the middle, you're just solving, like today I'm ripping out all of the existing save and load functions and replacing them with asynchronous save and load functions.
Real
Like,
exciting.
just a blast.
Buckle up.
This is why I do this, fellas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So otherwise, one other cool thing that kind of came out of it is, and there's a big advantage to getting your game out there and getting people talking about it, is that people talk about it and you get to learn what their demands are.
We get to see who's interested.
Who's
basically.
interested? And one of the things that we had kind of an inkling of, but didn't really fully absorb, was that the speedrunning community is going to be super into this. So it got posted over to there's like a speedrunners subreddit community. And they're really into Mario Maker. And so Levelhead is kind of a natural next step for that group. And so we kind of, one of them posted and they said, here's a list of demands, as a speedrunner, here are the things that I've been wanting out of all these existing games that I just haven't gotten. So things like ghosting, where whoever has the top score, you can race their ghost as
Or
like
even
as a
the top
little,
couple of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as we were thinking about it, we're like, if we get the ghosting in, that actually allows us to do something like what Super Meat Boy does, where your bodies, go running and dying everywhere and stuff like that.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah. So by solving one problem, we can also sort of adapt that solution to another.
Well, it's also super neat though, because that ghosting's been on the list actually since early in dev. We're like, I think we want this in here, but you have no idea of relative importance of these things. And so whenever you see a response come in where people are like, oh, that would be important, then we get to bump it up.
Yeah,
Right.
because it was at the bottom of the list.
It's
Really.
been at the bottom of the list for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we saw it. We're like, okay, we'll just do that next. So yeah, it was really interesting seeing it. And we put together a little, clipped together a little MPEG video that we put out on Twitter, which also did very well. Got passed all over the place. We've talked a lot about how Twitter we basically only use for one-on-one communication and then videos or gameplay snippets. So that one did very well and got a really good response too, which is always sort of a nice thing going into something like GDC. And I think overall it seems like the response has been just way more positive than I think any of us had anticipated, which is kind of nice.
Especially compared to we posted a video of the game maybe a month ago. And the response was kind of medium, and except for one person who's like, "This looks like shit."
Which
thanks, internet.
We pointed out, we're like, it is super
alpha.
early alpha. Like, you don't need
This
to worry
was
about it.
this was before any kind of legitimate art pass, before the scaling and all kinds of other stuff. Everything was all kinds of placeholder UI elements. To be fair, it kind of did. It didn't look awesome.
It didn't look good. But one of the things we talk about is when you're going to start talking about your game, you should have the art to a point where it looks good enough that people might be excited about the art, because it's actually the only thing they can understand early on. Games aren't experienced good, which means you can't actually know what the fuck it is until you play it. So all you're judging it on is what it looks like.
And I think importantly, with that video that we showed, we didn't show the editor at all. So so there was no indication to the uninformed passerby that, hey, this is a game where you build your own levels. Instead, I think it was this insanely complicated, super chaotic level where you're like riding a spring that's bouncing on treadmills over a series of fire cannons or something like that. So it was just madness. A lot happening with unfinished art. So I understand. I get it.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so our next, this kind of nicely set us up for getting back and sort of getting, as soon as we finish being completely diseased, getting fully back into the swing of things, and gave us a nice set of priorities. So our next biggest priority, or sort of two things going on, is to get Rumpus up and running, which involves actually getting the new website put up.
Yep.
So we'll be going into alpha for that sometime in the next short while, hopefully. And then with Levelhead is actually finishing out the suite of features that we think is sort of required to get a good
round of feedback.
A good round of game feedback, though.
Gameplay.
So yeah, and we've talked about this before, but there's a bunch of other stuff that we're aiming to do with Levelhead, as far as some story things and how the tech tree works and some other things that we just think we basically just know that how they're gonna work, and that they will work in the way that we anticipate. And so we're not necessarily going to worry about those for the alpha. So it'll be sort of more like a gameplay test rather than a full game test.
Yeah. And the reason that we're not even going to start implementing those until after the alpha. Basically the reason being, if you have something in there that's broken or unfinished, then that's where people's attention will be fixated on that broken piece. And that's going to sort of contaminate the rest of their testing experience. So we want good feedback about the things that we think are in a good state to see how wrong we are about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Another benefit that gives us is then we can actually start talking about it and potentially doing the alpha test, and then shipping some builds out to various platforms and other things to start kind of getting that conversation going about where this game might be going in the future. Yeah. So
then otherwise, one other cool thing happened at the end of GDC. So Jeff Kaplan, who's vice president of Blizzard.
He's the director of Overwatch.
And then he's some high up feller in Blizzard. So Sam had met him at DICE, and Jeff said, "Hey, come on down to the Blizzard office, and I'll show you around." So we were like, "Oh fuck yeah!" So we set that up, and we swung down there after GDC ended. So we flew down in the morning, and then we hung out with Jeff for the afternoon, and then flew back to St. Louis late at night. And so we got to kind of take a tour of their campus and stuff, and just kind of see like, what is it like? Because it's something that we've been doing is going to other studios and seeing what their space is like, what their philosophies are like, what their work culture is like.
So the other groups we visited are Ironhide down in Uruguay, which has like a super rad office space just covered in art and all sorts of cool stuff. And then Supergiant HQ as well. And the big question, because of course we're looking at our next move, is to get an actual space for ourselves, because we are still in a basement. Yeah. And
so we're trying to find inspiration of what are people doing that's good,
and what are they doing that they realize they should not have done.
Yeah.
The big one. Mainly sort of avoiding mistakes sort of thing. So it was really fun.
Building out an office space is a big undertaking.
Huge investment.
You got to think about it a lot, and it's fairly permanent in the sense that it's real hard to change it after you do it.
Yeah. So it was really fun because we got lunch with Jeff, and then he showed us around, and we were sort of just peppering with questions about, like, why are you guys doing all these things? Blizzard has all these cool statues, huge statues just all over the place.
Which they typically build statues for Blizz, or they commission somebody to build statues for BlizzCon, which is their yearly convention. And so they'll take the characters from their games and have these cool statues with like lights inside.
It's almost like being in a pantheon,
Yeah.
And these huge avatars of all the characters around. And so we're talking about like, what's that
Why exactly?
And I think we got some really good notes about. So I think Blizzard does an extremely good job of just sort of celebrating both their history and also the fact that their games do have a huge impact. And the thing is, we've talked about this before, you know, when you launch a game, like you just click a button. You don't, that's it.
Even Blizzard.
When
like, they launch a game, somebody just hits a button at some point.
And so there's no built-in feeling. It's not like, you know, it's not like winning a marathon where you're crossing a finish line and people are screaming. There's not a built-in feeling of gravity to the whole situation. And so what they
very
do,
anticlimactic.
what they do is they do this really good job of sort of with these physical items of sort of like building these artifacts that hold a lot of that gravity and that weight of the work that everybody's doing. So essentially it allows people to, I guess it makes the work just feel more meaningful. It's like you walk in and there's this pantheon, there's like a huge bronze orc statue in the center of their HQ, which just looks amazing. And it's got their sort of studio's design pillars around it, baked into stone in the ground.
And they do stuff like when they launch a game, they erect a flagpole around this, like in the center of campus where the orc statue is. There's a lot of kind of land around it. And then they put up a flagpole, and then the dev team who launched the game gets to hoist the flag up with the game's, you know, name on it and logo and everything.
Yeah, and so we just took a lot of inspiration from them as far as how they're doing a good job of celebrating this stuff, because, you know, all of us are still, I guess maybe I'm the only one still working on a laptop. You're working on one too.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you don't have a big feeling of permanence. Like you come in the office and just sort of like jack in the morning. We don't have much stuff in terms of celebrating the fact that we've been successful as a company.
We have bare minimum desks. You know, we don't have any.
We have like a poster.
Yeah, our paraphernalia is basically posters and stickers, and then mugs that have nothing to do with our games. Right.
We have a few pieces of fan art. We have that perler. Someone made a big, cool like quadrupus thing out of those perler beads, which is hanging up. But that's like it. So we don't have much going on in terms of actually bringing the weight of our accomplishments into the physical realm, because all of them are digital. Yeah. So we're not sure exactly what we're going to do yet, but we're looking at some ways to kind of do better about celebrating that stuff in-house, so that when we come, literally in-house, I guess in this case, but when we come into the office, that it just feels like you're walking
doing
into
something important.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, Blizzard just nails it 100%.
Yeah. And of course, a big part of that is just where they are relative to where we are in terms of having
resources,
spending cash.
Some would say they are slightly more successful than us.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's debatable, but
it is also a matter of priorities, because, you know, they have relative to us infinite money, but they also spend
relative to us infinite money.
Right? So it's not just that they have more, it's that they have made it a priority to dress up their offices and provide all kinds of swag for their employees. I don't know if employees buy it or not, but what we noticed too is that there's just stuff everywhere. Like everybody we saw was wearing, you know, some sort of a shirt or something. Yeah. And whether it's provided or not, just by the company, it's there. It's very present and visible. And so they just decided to do that. And so we can do the same thing on a smaller scale, proportional to our level of success, you know, if we just decide that there's some value there. I think that was, to me, the big lesson was that stuff is important. It's not one of those sort of things that you get to do once you have infinite money. It's a thing that you should do as soon as you can afford it, and once you can, and then, you know, at your scale. So, you know, so now don't have 12-foot tall statues, but maybe get, you know, a 3-inch figurine, you know?
Yeah. Or maybe, so we're really just tapping into the budget here. We're spending $30 on 2 16-foot LED strips.
Yep. Okay. Watch out, Blizzard.
We are coming for you.
Why 2? Because then we can have one of them be kind of yellow, one of them be kind of fuchsia, you know, and we can line the room where we're working. Boom.
Amazing.
Now it looks cool.
Now it's super, super cool.
My favorite ones we got back yesterday, and Seth had put up we have one 7-foot tall poster thing of Crashlands that we use at conventions. And Seth had put it up like between he and I's desk.
It's the only spot
that it could fit. The problem is it's also like the whiteboard area that Seth and I use, because all the walls are just covered in whiteboard paint.
Yeah.
And so both looked at it and he was like, "Is this good here?" And I was like, "No."
And I was like, "Yeah, no, fuck this." I took it back down.
So, but a big part of this also is we're trying to figure out and really just nail down exactly what those principles are that our studio operates by. because you can't get an orc statue with a bunch of cool stone principles until you have some principles.
And also, you can't get a orc statue and then put it in front of your whiteboard.
That's true.
Because you got to use the whiteboard.
So
right now, our space is, some would say, constrained.
Yeah.
Some would say.
So, yeah, I mean, but it's just something for us to be thinking about. And honestly, until like basically Levelhead will have to come out and do quite well.
Yeah.
For us to even start making plans to do, to put together an office and build out or something. But it's something to be thinking about always. Thinking about what to do.
Because your space affects you tremendously. So
it does. And of course, PC gamers know this. LED lights
make everything
faster, better, more awesome. They add weight to every situation.
Yep.
I feel like weddings should have more LED strips.
They should.
Because that's a big important event. Just fill your life with LED strips. All right. Also, one last bit of news before we get on to questions. Final Space.
Yes.
So there's a new cartoon from Olin Rogers. And Olin Rogers is a YouTuber who started in a sketch comedy trio called Balloon Shop back in 2006 or 7 or something.
He's like one of the earliest YouTubers, but never had a huge breakout success, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have like 1 billion subscribers or anything like that. He's got a very particular brand of humor that all of us really enjoy, which is
lots of screaming
and really weird word combinations of things. So
yes,
dipping your toes in my mind butter, for example, is a quote from his thing. And he has a few phenomenal videos that I would suggest watching. One is called The Lion's Blaze, which is about gaming, which I think everybody would enjoy. And then the other is called Ghost in the Stalls, which is a story. It's just a story that he tells, which is incredible. But the guy's got this goofy voice, and he does all these weird portmanteaus, just weird word combinations. And he pitched this cartoon called Final Space. I managed to get it on TBS. Conan O'Brien saw it, apparently signed on as the executive producer. And then they got like David Tennant, the guy who's the Doctor Who. He's one of the voice actors for it. There's a star-studded cast.
He plays the villain.
Yeah. There's a star-studded cast somehow. And it came
Ron
out.
Perlman.
Yeah. All sorts of crazy stuff. And so we're over here and we're sort of cheering on Olin, our guy.
He's kind of the perpetual underdog.
Yeah, he's very lovable. So
yeah.
I highly recommend checking out his videos, but then also checking out his Final Space. I watched it a couple days ago, bought it on YouTube for like $15 by the series, and hilarious. It's an adult cartoon, so there's a lot of swearing, some occasional like grotesque violence.
There's definitely violence.
Yeah, but some of it is hysterical, and I haven't laughed. Like I really like watching Adventure Time, so it has kind of a similar feel to it, but then it tips into this adult humor stuff on occasion. It's just very ridiculous. And I think there's at least one time per episode where I was laughing uncontrollably. So like they do a good job of sort of hitting the mark with a good consistency. So I highly recommend it. Go support our boy Olin doing his thing.
Yeah. And if history is any indication, what's going to happen with the series is it's going to start in a very lighthearted and comedic way. And it's going to end with everybody weeping.
Yep.
Would be my...
It sort of is his recipe whenever he does his longer form.
It disarms you with weird ass dialogue and jokes, and then you start to like the characters, and then you're sad.
Catch feelings.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I did watch the most recent episode. It definitely starting to go down. Yeah. Starting to go down. So, all right. So yeah, check that out. All right. Let's get on to some questions. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. So if you'd like to get your question onto a future episode, get over there and then just do stuff. First question comes from Doombrowski. Is taking the trip to GDC worth it? Please explain why or why not. Love the cast. Best of luck on the Crashlands Switch launch.
Thanks, buddy. GDC trip worthiness.
It
what
depends.
Do you think?
It depends on why you're going. Which means you need to know why you're going before you do it. So for us, the first trip was worth it because we didn't know what it was for. We didn't know why we were going, and we needed to go once to figure out what this thing was all about.
And then we learned that.
We also learned that nobody knew who we were or gave a shit about us, etc. So it was simultaneously educational and very deflating.
This was our 6th trip.
This one was.
And my 4th or 5th, I guess. Yeah. And
it's very humbling the first time you go.
Yeah. Well, and actually it will, for most people, it'll be humbling every time you go, right? Because success in the industry is very difficult. Most of the people who attend GDC are trying to figure out like some path into the games industry. And so each time they go, there's not going to necessarily be sort of a sense that they have progressed personally, right? And so you kind of see the world around you changing. On the other hand, since most people are in the same boat, you kind of get that camaraderie where kind of everyone's trying to figure it out, everyone's struggling, and you can kind of learn from what people are doing. So I think for me anyway, my first one in particular was really good because I went to a lot of talks, got a sense of who people were in the industry, got a sense of the kind of things that people thought were important because GDC as an institution, it's a company, right? And they curate talks based on what they think they got
to sell tickets.
Yeah, they're selling tickets, right? Yeah. So they curate their talks based on what they think the game developer community wants to hear. And so based on just the talks that are available and what you go see, you just get to get a sense of that. They also give talks preferentially to people who they think are important. Right. So you also get a sense of who the sort of broader community thinks is important in the industry. So for me, like as a first visit, it was a great way just to kind of get a sense of the industry. After that, things were kind of hit or miss depending on what we were going for. Because the second time we went, we were trying to show off Crashlands and we were trying to get people excited about what we were doing. And it was very hard because the game, frankly, wasn't in a good enough state to get anybody excited.
Plus, it's a hard demo.
And it's a hard demo, even when it is in a good enough
state. It's the
state.
sort of thing where like you're going to tell people about it and they're like, I mean, cool, but I've got 3 hours to enjoy this.
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, and I think once you get over the initial sort of surge of passion and enthusiasm from your first GDC, once you start to see the pattern, which is basically a lot of the talks, like a substantial proportion of the talks, are meant to sell the dream, right? So a lot of them, or to kind of, a lot of them are talks about passion, about failure, about perseverance.
And this is a bone that we have to pick with the GDC talk structure because. In my case, I've done 2 business talks in the last 2 years that are supposed to be for independent studios, for indies. They're never put in the indie track, right? Because the indie track is actually not about business,
right? It's about selling the dream.
And that's a really important thing to understand is if you're just getting the indie summit pass, you tend to just see those postmortems about sort of how big names did a particular thing or launched a particular game, but you don't tend to get actual nuts and bolts advice about, okay, I'm an indie studio. How the fuck do I market this thing that I made?
Yeah. That's what I think you
got to pony up the extra like $1,000 to go to the business track.
Right. Well, I think the idea is that that indie at GDC means trying to figure out your way. It doesn't actually mean I've got an independent business and I need to figure out how to sell my game and whatever. It really just means like all those people who are in the trenches who haven't made it yet and are trying to figure out how.
Which is of course not what it really means, but that's kind of the way that the talks get relegated at GDC. Yeah,
this is reflecting like the cost of the indie pass. We typically go on an indie pass, except for the past couple of years, because it's the cheapest pass that gets you access to sort of your people. Like all the people are who you think are your people. Everybody kind of struggling together. So I don't know. I think the main problem with GDC is really just people don't know why they go. They just think that they should. And so they do, and then they get there, and then the question is, now what? And so the thing that you're probably going to do is go to a lot of talks. But if you're going to talks to learn something, you're going to be disappointed because
depends on your pass.
It depends on your pass enormously, but it also you don't really get to learn anything because
you will get inspired.
You'll get inspired,
which is, it's not worth nothing.
No, it's definitely not worth nothing. But if you're going to learn, you're going to think that you learned something and actually will not have. And I think that this is an important problem that is propagated by things like GDC is that talks are chosen because they're supposed to have takeaways, right? And they're supposed to have very clear, well-defined takeaways that you as a listener are supposed to walk away with like, okay, cool, I've learned something important, right? But the fact is that everybody's experience is so different. Launching games is something that if anybody had the recipe for it, that this wouldn't even exist as a thing that we all go to and try to figure out how the hell to do things together. So actually, nobody knows how to be successful. Nobody knows why they were or were not successful. So the takeaways that you walk away with aren't actually lessons for you. They're sort of demonstrations of what somebody else thinks is important. And so that's why I say it's a really good experience if you're trying to figure out what people think is important. but not necessarily if you're trying to learn how to do something.
Yeah, you can't take somebody else's experience wholesale and just replicate that.
Yeah.
And I think there's also that kind of goofy rule that, if you're hearing about something at GDC, it's at least 2 years old.
Yeah.
Probably 3, because somebody had to have the idea, spend a year or 2 developing that game or whatever, launch it, then it has to get noticed and get successful. And then that person has to submit a GDC talk in October, 6 months before the next GDC, right?
Yep.
And so timing wise, it's likely that what you're hearing about is 3 years old. So, I submitted a talk. The talk that I gave was called Crashlands is Designed by Chaos. It wasn't actually supposed to be about Crashlands originally. It was just called Designed by Chaos. And the feedback I got from the selection committee was basically, you got to talk about Crashlands. You can't just talk about design generally, right? Because you gotta get people in there by using your flagship game. Right. And I'm sitting here thinking, our game is 2 years old now.
Game's old as the hills.
And we started developing it 4 years ago. So I got some old ass news right there. Because I want to talk about our up to date ideas of how to design games, not what we thought was true 4 years ago.
Well, I do think there's one interesting thing that a lot of people don't quite take advantage of when they're at GDC. And so part of it is that when your first time you're going, it's just sort of bamboozling. There's so much stuff going on. You're going to go to talks and meet people.
Your BAMs are getting boozled.
Yeah.
All day.
And
24/70.
One of the reasons why I think it's continued to be a more valuable experience for us, and it should be. I think if you're doing it right, it should be more valuable over time. Every time you go, this is by far our best time that we've gone, is because we put a really big effort on the networking aspect, and not just randomly, but with very particular people. So
last year we tried to network randomly.
It was dumb.
It totally didn't pan out. Most people didn't even respond to us.
Yeah. So instead this year, what we did was we just said, okay, if anybody wants to meet with us, they'll let us know. And we're not going to reach out unless we have basically these like 6 or 7 partners who are platform people.
Who we need to talk to.
Yeah. Engine people, whatever else, who are just sort of core to our business, who we absolutely need to talk to. And then beyond that, whatever, we'll let people come to us. It was much more relaxed this year.
And this time we said, we're going to say no a lot.
Yeah.
So if somebody's coming from an ad company, if somebody's got an SDK,
not interested,
whatever it is. Yeah. We're just not going to do it.
So, we basically didn't entertain any of those this year, and instead just focused on meeting other devs who had reached out to us, either through Twitter while we were at the show or via email some weeks before. And I think overall it was just a much better show for us, much more relaxed. And then on top of that, I think it sort of showed that the talks we've given in the past, and then the work that we've done at GDC in the past of actually doing that more random networking structure where you come in and there should be at least, like 3 to 5 targets who you're just trying to actually get some time with, whether that's a studio who you admire and you want to go talk to one of their people, or if it's a platform holder or whatever else. And then beyond that, you just, anytime you have time between the talks, don't spend it just like noodling around on your phone. Like go talk to other people who are there. Because
we spent a lot of time just sitting at tables and then talking to whoever was
that's
there.
primarily what we do. And that's primarily what we did the last couple of years, in fact.
But there were a number of times where I'd sit down at a table with somebody and they would not look up from their phone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a clear message of like, don't talk to me, don't engage, right? So I wouldn't know if that person was simultaneoly tweeting about how hard it is to meet people.
Well, this is one of the crazy things. You see tons of people on their phones. And if you actually look at the GDC hashtag on Twitter, a high percentage of the overall tweets going out are people tweeting about
how hard it is to
talk to people at GDC.
So just quit tweeting. Put your dang phone down.
I think we were talking about this a little bit one of the nights because we had a similar experience where we sat down and there's a whole table full of people and everyone's just on their phones. At no point did anybody, want to chat essentially. And it was this question of, are people confusing the fact that it is just hard to socialize, period? It's just a hard thing for any human to do, with the idea that they have a harder time than other people do socializing.
Yeah. People seem to think, at least according to Twitter, that they're unique and finding it awkward and difficult to say hello to a rando.
It is.
It just sucks for everybody.
Yeah. Including us, including people who maybe don't even oftentimes need to make an introduction because they are known. It's still just not necessarily a fun thing. You never know who the person is. You never know if they're going to be fun or
from an ad company.
In
which case, then you got to figure out how to decouple. From that.
Shape shifting all the time. You can never tell. So I just had this weird feeling where I was like, I wonder if people are sort of misreading where they fit in the whole thing, which is everyone has a hard time talking to people.
Yeah.
That's it. Even if you seem like you're really good at it, it's still just like a pain in the ass, and it's weird and awkward to go talk to people. But if you pay to go to GDC, you should absolutely be trying to talk to people almost the entire time that you're at the show. There's just no excuse, I think, for not, unless you're just like, hey, I just need to work on some stuff, or maybe I do need to send some tweets out to get in touch with the person I'm trying to meet with. But I think I've always been kind of shocked by it, but I think people don't tend to take advantage of the fact that there's just tons of people there who are all working on game stuff, and you really should just be talking.
Surrounded by them.
Yeah, just be talking like the whole time. And it's way better than, like, talking with your face is way better than Twitter. And that was one of our experiences early on, is that we would send these tweets out and be like, hey, we're at blah. If anybody wants to meet up, no one show up. No one say anything.
Sometimes we would tweet people directly. Hey, you want to come do this? You want to come? Because they're tweeting, talking about like, oh, nobody wants to meet with me. And we'd be like, we'll meet with you. And then just no response.
So it just that kind of sucks, Yeah. And so I think that's the whole thing Adam was getting at. Like, it's a very humbling experience. It always is. Even, I mean, there's some cases this year where, like, reach out to people, don't get anything, or have an experience with them and just not really getting any traction. So yeah, I think it sort of has changed over the years, from early on being like, what the fuck is even happening in the industry, to, okay, we need to grow our network and meet with as many people as possible, to now I think a much more comfortable sort of, I feel like we understand what it's for and how we are supposed to operate once we arrive. But the result is that it's like a sprint for us.
Yeah, so just meeting after meeting.
Yeah, we were talking to people nonstop.
Almost like
Adam lost his voice by the second.
Well, I mean, it was from diseases, though. It was a combo of talking a lot plus diseases.
Yeah. One of the things that, I mean, I starting last GDC, I stopped drinking at GDC, period.
Yeah, it's a good move.
Because 2 GDCs ago, I did drink, stayed up late, which if I'm staying up till midnight at GDC, that's like staying up till 2 a.m. because we're from 2 time zones over. So that's much later than normal. Had several drinks, go to bed, wake up the next morning. All of a sudden, I'm very cold. And then I'm sweating. And then it turns out I had the flu. So, you tend to do things that weaken your immune system all at once. Yeah. You're shaking lots of hands, surrounded by people, staying up late, drinking, whatever. It's just a bad move. So I still managed, like, I went and met with Yo-Yo Games with the flu. I was like, sorry guys, I'm probably spreading this, but I got to be at this meeting. So it's something to always be really careful of too.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten a little smarter about that. We don't actually go to the parties at GDC. We just do our social.
We go to the ones that are early and then have 0 or 1 drinks and then leave, chat with people for an hour and go home.
Yeah. So we were in bed, I think, by 10 or 10:30
every night.
We had one late night on Monday, I think.
That was a mistake.
It was a mistake.
It
was a good time.
It was a very good time.
You notice that I didn't have the late night on Monday.
That's true.
I'm the only one who didn't get sick. Adam and Sam are loading up on zinc and like taking all kinds of vitamins for weeks in advance. And like, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be sick. And I just went to bed on time and I was fine. I didn't do any of that other stuff.
Although I'm still less sick than I normally have gotten.
There you go.
So it's I hit somewhere in the middle, I think. And that's the other thing to remember too, is that when it comes to the question of whether GDC is worth it, it is enormously costly.
Yes.
Not just exactly financially, but also on your time, because you're almost definitely going to get sick. Like nearly everybody does.
And on your brains.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because coming back it's hard.
Yeah.
Because it's also the week leading up to GDC, we're going crazy trying to get our build ready to show to people and stuff. So it's a very intense week.
Probably one of our most productive weeks of the year.
But depending on how you treat it, it could not be, because if you're trying to, if you're trying to shore up a bunch of stuff that isn't really how you want it anyway, but just to make it, look good enough that you can show it or whatever, then you're essentially wasting that.
Or like build a custom demo like we did with Crashlands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons, right? Because if you show that to a publisher or a platform holder who then gets really into it and now is behind it, well, then that was actually, everything is now worth it.
Right.
But if nobody gets behind it, now you had taken a gamble and you lost.
That's what it always is every time.
Yeah, it's just a gamble, and so it's a very expensive gamble. And again, it's going to knock out. We've gotten good enough at it that it basically just knocks out a week now, which is the week of GDC. Actually, I guess probably 2 weeks, because week of GDC and then recovery from diseases.
Everyone's messed up.
Yeah,
afterward.
So you just have to realize that if you actually take huge effort to get a lot out of the experience, then it can be worth even the lost time and the high cost. If you don't, then it's absolutely not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my bet is it's going to take a few more, well, maybe even just this whole week for us to kind of ramp back up to full production mode.
Yeah.
Because there's the sickness, there's the time zone change, there's the sort of general burnout of having been sprinting for 2 weeks straight, you know?
Yeah.
It's the 5-hour energy thing. You know, you're not just adding
You're
that
borrowing
energy.
from tomorrow.
You're borrowing it from the future, right?
Yeah, this weekend we all just basically slept.
I slept for 24 of the 40 hours.
Yeah, I just slept a lot.
I tried to avoid sleeping because I get onto a normal schedule, but I was just tired as fuck.
Yep.
It's one of those, like, when you're that tired. This is why sleep matters too, because if you're tired, all of your good habits
they're just gone.
fucking dissolve.
Yep.
So, speaking of good habits, next question comes from Dr. Dino, which is pretty awesome.
Pretty good.
Hey, brothers, what do you say to those that think self-help / productivity / habit formation books are a bunch of hogwash? Also, I get my games industry news from your podcasts. Also, can't wait for your game jam. Also, love y'all. Bye.
A lot of comments appended on this question.
Many things have happened. I would actually say to the first question.
I think there's only one question.
Is that true? Then for that question, I would say that's largely correct.
Yes.
Most self-help books in particular are absolute hogwash. And lots of things things that advertise themselves as self-help books in particular, because they're super hand-wavy. They don't actually have a lot of practical advice. They mostly try to sort of, again, just use hand-waviness to provide ideas for things.
But they serve one really important purpose. So, one of the most effective things that somebody can do for weight loss is keep a food journal.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it makes you think about what you're doing,
Yes.
right? Whereas normally your habits are absent-minded things that you do automatically and you do them without thinking, and they happen by triggers, right? And so I think the role of something like a self-help book is like, why are they so long when they can typically be summed up in a sentence, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just so that for 8 hours while you're reading that book, you're just exposing yourself to the idea of, like, think about this, think about this, think about this. So that maybe over time, if you read 5 or 6 books about, I don't know, being tidy or something, then...
Well, like, I wouldn't call
it's just a little bit of a nudge.
But again, it depends on the thing. So I'm not talking about like a book that says being tidy is good for you and then gives you some tips on how to do it. Like, that's a net win, you know?
Yeah.
Or getting things done. Like, yeah, sure, the middle of the book is a whole bunch of stuff about using paper as if we still are from 15 years ago. Right?
I know. Who
uses paper? But, you know, the message of the book is clear and then easy to understand, and the tips and tricks are super useful. And I still make use of them today, even though I read that book nearly 10 years ago. So those, I'm not saying that as a field, like, there's just nothing good there. In fact, I've gotten a lot of good out of a lot of these books. I'm talking about things that are the things that people think of when they think of self-help, like The Secret, which is a net negative. That is a net fucking like, if you read that and believe anything in that book, your life is worse now.
Because you're not going to do things.
Because you believe the universe owes you shit, which is just fucking wacky, right? So there are a lot of, you know, self-labeled self-help
you're talking
books
about the
actually bad.
The snake oil version.
So The Secret should just be called survivorship bias.
Exactly.
It's real.
Yeah, or it's not even survivorship bias. It's just the cognitive bias towards noticing things once you start to think about it, right? Because the whole gist of the book is if you believe that good things will happen, they will happen, right? But what it happens is you just look for good things and then notice them now.
It's like a gratitude practice.
Yeah, it's a gratitude practice. But now it's disguised as this, like, you know, mystical.
But I think importantly,
horseshit.
if there's any examples in that book of people who this happened to, you know, that's also the survivorship bias problem, where it's like, they're not going to talk about the 1,000 people who it didn't happen to.
Here's a question. Isn't every book just a self-help book?
Yeah,
if you're properly paying attention
correct.
to your
Every
life?
book should be.
Yeah.
I think this is the thing. So I read a lot of books. My goal this year is actually to not read. So I've been switching it out for a drawing habit, which has been interesting. But I haven't read basically anything this year. A little bit of Walden, which is fun. But the interesting thing is that all the books, I mean, even the fiction books I've read, I think it just takes you have to have a proper orientation toward your own life. And then you just start pulling stuff from everything. I mean, Kavath, the character from King Killer Chronicles.
Yeah.
Even fiction books, you can just summon pieces of a character to help you. For example, when you're at GDC and you're like, I feel like total loser right now and I don't know who to talk to. And then you think, hey, that one guy Kavath in that book way back when did this thing. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Like, I'm going to pull on his strength and use it here. Read stuff like Team of Rivals, which is the Abe Lincoln book about how he sort of operated. And yeah, you take notes and you say, okay, how do I want to I think just putting yourself in a position where you're always asking the question, is there a signal here that I can grab onto that can help me improve in some way?
What would Abe do?
Really? Yeah. I mean, seriously. Or you just realize like he's a really good storyteller and that seemed to have made a huge difference for him overall. How do people tell stories? And then you go like, watch a YouTube video about it. Where, how can I do these things better? So I think it's always interesting to me because I've read plenty of the self-help and productivity things. But I think there's always a gap for a lot of people, which is that they just read them and expect that reading is equivalent to
they're looking for a secret.
Yeah. And the reality is that you still have to do stuff. And when you realize that that's the case, then every single book you read gets turned into a self-help book because it's the case that nearly every book you read has something in it where you could be like, I wonder, what if I did blah, or what if I tried blah?
Right.
Could I apply this to my own life? And then you go do a thing. And I think the big problem I have with people who don't like self-help books is that usually when I ask them, like, what have you read? First of all, is it The Secret? Because it's a garbage one. But in general, like, what have you read? And even if they have read one of the same ones that I read, the question is I always have is, what did you do afterward?
Yeah.
Because if you just read it,
fucking read it.
But it's not even as simple as that. It's not even as simple as, read it and then apply that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's also understand that there's nuance there because something like The Secret actually does do something good, which is teaches you to pay attention to things that are good, right?
Correct.
Which is enormously valuable just to you as a person. And it makes your life better. And so you can read that book. And if you knew that that's what it was doing and that's why people believe that it works, right? Then you could take away this actually very healthy practice and apply it to your life and get something great out of it. The problem is if you just take it at face value for exactly what it is and what it claims to be, then it can be a net negative instead, right? So it's all about actually having to think about why. Why does this stuff do what these people claim that it does? And even the book about habits, which is a great one.
The Power of Habit.
The Power of Habit. And he digs into all this research about how brains work and all this kind of stuff, right? And tries to give a whole bunch of examples and kind of help you think about what these triggers are and all this stuff. But again, if you don't think about why, if you just try to like look for recipes that you can follow and, look for things that you can go do, they might not apply in your life. Yeah. The way that your life is right now. And so you actually have to dig way deeper than just there's no secret in any of these things, which is part of my thing that I hate the most about The Secret is that even though there's no secret anywhere, it claims to be the only one, But the fact is there is no secret. There's nothing you can just go read and then suddenly now your life has changed.
Well, I think
there's one thing you have to do.
That's the problem I have with it. I think if you start taking an orientation where you say, I'm the one who's responsible for making myself better, then I think that's the only point that you get at where you actually have the capacity to improve from reading a self-help book. Like the book doesn't, it is not an acting force on you. It's not going to do anything for you just by virtue of you slathering your eyeballs on it. Yeah. And I think that's what always bothers me.
And the person who wrote it is just a person. They may have found something that helped them in their life in some way, but they may be completely wrong about why it did.
Absolutely.
And they therefore will also be completely wrong about how you should approach that same idea in your own life.
Even if that's the case, if you think about it and try it or do, some variation of it to fit your circumstance, you can still get great stuff out of it.
You can learn stuff.
And this is why whenever someone's like, oh yeah, I stopped reading the book because I just hate that person. We talked about this with Anti-Fragile, right?
Yeah.
Guy's kind of a dick. This is what it is.
But what about his points?
What about his points? And I think this always bothers me because even The Secret, like I guarantee you, if I read the book, I would get something out of it because I know how to read now.
Well, you also know how to evaluate stuff. Just do it blindly.
But that's what I mean. Like I feel like people kind of skip over that piece of what reading actually is. It's not just parsing the information. It's evaluating it and then it's twisting it to whatever your context is, and then maybe even testing it after the fact.
Yeah, I think there's another layer to this that also just kind of gets lost, which is a self-help book. I mean, it does actually give you, in some cases, it gives you a recipe. So something like getting things done or whatever. It's like, here, like if you want to get shit done better with less stress, here, just try this thing. This is exactly what I do, just step by step, and it's a process, right? I think people run into trouble when they are looking for that sort of instant silver bullet where like, if you just read this book, and if you just know a thing, then that's going to be what changes it, as opposed to saying, I'm going to now internalize this and change everything about my behavior in perpetuity. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, I was checking out at the grocery store and I walked past this. Have you guys ever seen Woman's World magazine? It's this crazy magazine that has basically two primary focuses. One is weight loss and the other is pampering yourself. I'm like, these are mutually exclusive things, right? So like obviously the point of this magazine is to sell copies by creating demand for people for both of those things, right? Because it basically that kind of an angle preys on the notion that you can change everything about your situation in a very short-term way, right? So eat nothing but soup for 2 weeks and lose 39 pounds, right? And then go on a cruise and pamper yourself, right? And you're just going to keep bouncing back and forth. And none of these things are really going to work and none of it's going to stick because you're just looking for these short-term changes. So,
because it would be a very boring magazine that said, eat a little bit less for the next 5 years.
Yeah, just a and like this is known. You know, this is not.
Yeah, try to exercise more for the rest of your life.
Yeah, right. Exercise slightly more and eat slightly less. That's the one issue of the magazine. Just put that on the cover. You never need to sell another.
It's like, here's this one crazy sex tip for the next decade and a half. Just pay attention to your partner.
And have it.
Yeah, just have.
That's all you got to do. Pretty good.
It's not complicated.
Yeah, we wouldn't sell any magazines.
Yeah,
We might sell a book.
Well, actually, we could sell exactly one magazine with a whole bunch of life tips.
Probably couldn't sell it.
Isn't one copy of a magazine, if it's only ever just a book or a pamphlet? I think it is.
Probably a pamphlet.
And so I think that when it comes to self-help kinds of things, I think there is like, why is there always a need for these books? Like, why do they keep being published and people keep buying them? And it's because people are looking for the secret, right?
And because there isn't one.
Yeah, people are. People are looking for some kind of a high leverage, low cost thing they can do while keeping everything in their life exactly as it currently is, but somehow yield different results, right?
Yeah. The thing to remember: so you're not special. Nobody else has their shit together either.
Yep.
Nobody has a secret because there isn't one. Everybody's anxious in social situations when they don't know people.
Yep.
There's just
work is hard.
There's just no fucking secret there. You just got to go out and do stuff. You know?
Yeah. So I mean, as an example, so I think it was 2015. I had been sitting at like 170 pounds for like 6 years. I was like, I want to get stronger, just arbitrarily, because I needed a reason to go to the gym, and I hadn't been able to get a habit that stuck, right? And so I was like, if I put together a 10-week weightlifting program with actual goals at the end for like what my body weight might be or whatever, and then I can actually gauge my progress toward that. And since it's on a shorter time frame, then there's an end point, but also it's long enough that I have to work at it and I have to establish habits that stick through the whole thing, right? And so I put together a big ass spreadsheet and I tracked it. And Sam, you joined me in this.
This was right before my transplant.
This was right before Sam's transplant.
They were like, you're going to lose 25 pounds. And then Seth was about to start this thing. He's like, what if you gain 25 pounds?
I was like, join me in the quest for gains.
It's literally what we called it. I told the doctor I was doing it. She was like, what?
Yeah. You're like, I'm going on the quest for gains. And so it's basically research, nutrition and like how to manage all of that stuff. And so then Sam went in. So Sam and I went to the gym, and you only did it for 6 weeks, I think, right? And then Sam went
gained 18 pounds.
He went to get his transplant, and he was like the Hulk. And they were like, what the fuck happened? He's like, just worked really fucking hard for 6 weeks, right? But it's not like you don't just like read a thing and they're like, do this one weird trick. And it's like, no, you just plan out the whole fucking thing.
Well, it's more like sustain this one weird trick.
Sustain this very specific lifestyle.
Yeah.
For a long time.
It's like this one weird trick that doctors hate. It's like, well, they hate it because it's a lie and their patients do stupid things.
Right. Yeah.
I ate soup for a week and now I have a sodium overdose. And
I mean, and you will like, I mean, here's my secret to losing weight. Cause I lost 15 pounds recently, which is to have terrible gastric reflux.
Probably from eating a fuckload of candy.
That doesn't cause reflux. So that's unrelated because it's actually because the sphincter in my gut doesn't work.
Okay.
So not candy related. That is a separate issue.
Okay. That way the candy can
get in there fast.
Get in there.
Yeah. It's just like, it's a candy dumping system, right?
Your body is like, wow, we need to get this candy in here faster.
Right.
Open it up.
Yeah. So my secret was to have a faulty sphincter so that food just falls into my stomach and acid just comes back out. Right. So that was the first part of my secret. And then the next part was to have that be so unbearable that I had to have surgery and have a robot stick its arms into my guts and then tie my stomach in a knot.
And doctors loved it
Customers did love it.
Because you paid them
A bunch. Well,
to get this fixed.
I mean, I paid them a bunch, and then insurance paid the rest of the bunch.
Insurance hated it.
Yeah,
Doctors loved it.
That they definitely did. And then I just couldn't swallow for weeks. And so all I could eat were things that were liquids, and even that hurt and was very difficult. And as a consequence, I didn't want to eat anything because it hurt a lot to eat. Yeah. And I lost 15 pounds. So
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very brave, story of dedication and working hard. Anyone can do it.
So brave. So brave. All right, let's hit one really quick question and then we're done. All right.
What?
Because we've only hit 2, so I want to
go.
get the magic 3. All right, this comes from imcade. Hello, it's 4:44 a.m. I've been coding for 4 hours to make a sprite move left and right. It's my first day ever on GameMaker 2. After much effort, my error was a simple typo.
Yep, sounds about
How
right.
often do little mistakes catch you up, and what do you do to prevent them?
Most of the time, and nothing.
Yep.
But the more of them you make, the faster you can correct them.
That is true.
Because you can identify it.
You're like a rolling Katamari ball of error detection.
Yeah. Well, it's mostly because you know what it can't be now, because at the beginning, especially, you're always positive that something is wrong with the engine.
Right. Because you're perfect, even though you've been programming for 4 hours. There's no possible way.
I can't imagine how.
Why is it that it starts there? I don't know.
I don't know.
This fucking program.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it's doing exactly what I did.
It's like, the first step is to remember that whatever your program is doing, it is exactly what you told it to do, right?
Correct.
So always remember you are definitely at fault.
Unless you've been working in that program for 20,000 hours and you know it so fucking well that you know what its faults are.
Right.
In which case, send a bug report.
Yeah. Which is where I'm at.
Yeah, because we have those. And then otherwise it's just now just practice that understanding when you see something happen, what could possibly cause it, because that allows you to narrow down so quickly where the problem can be.
So as an artist, you have a weird set of other things. So for me, because it's technical art, so it needs to be able to go into the game. So there's this suite of rules. So I just know them now mentally, but there's a suite of rules as far as how things are exported that make it optimized for Seth handling them once they get in game. So for example, if you're going to export a projectile, something that's going to be like rotated in code, then it needs to be exported pointing to the right. As in if it's a bullet, you point the shell to the right.
That's 0 degrees rotation.
Right.
In GameMaker.
And then if you're going to have a thing that just rotates around its center at all, then you need to have an odd number of pixels in the bounding box so that there's a center pixel from which everything can rotate. And then because we have the Inkbot, which is the tool Adam built that automatically exports everything, there's like 7 different rules for how it actually makes sure that it exports things. And we've come across, I feel like we've uncovered all of them by now. Yeah. Who the fuck knows?
We've uncovered all of them that we've uncovered. So
all sorts of weird stuff where either it's an Inkscape problem or a transform has been applied to an object that the Inkbot can't see and understand.
It's the Inkscape version of a typo.
Exactly. And so what'll happen is I'll be looking at my screen and it looks like it should be exporting just fine. Everything looks fine, but it's not. And so my immediate thing, of course, is that the Inkbot's broken because I'm perfect.
Right. Because I mean,
and so usually I'm like, Adam, what the fuck? I think the Inkbot's down because sometimes it dies. So he'll go and he's like, nope, super alive. So I'm like, shit, that means it's my problem now. So go look in it. And oftentimes it'll be something like, something in some sub menu because I had rotated that rectangle into some place. It just broke everything, but you can't tell when you rotated a rectangle
because it's still a rectangle.
Because it's still fucking rectangle. Especially if it's a fucking square.
Especially if it's a square.
So then you have to like do all this back. But now, so this whole idea of rolling your error detection methods forward. I think if this happens now, I can pare it down usually within like 2 minutes what the problem is.
Yeah, because the Inkbot does go down like once every 3 weeks. Yeah. So it's not an unlikely scenario even.
Right.
But then also that rotation thing happens on about the same time scale. And so, so you kind of just understand the sources of where the problems can be. You've debugged them a bunch of times. You know the quick things to try to just see if you make this one change that fixes a common problem. I've lost a stupid amount of time to typos and to things where I thought I had done something that I didn't do, or where
missing semicolon
or in JavaScript, because JavaScript has very weird variable scoping, meaning like where a program can see the value of a thing. And so there'll just be cases where it looks exactly right. Like you're just reading it. You're like, oh yeah, everything is there because you were missing something somewhere. Then all of a sudden it didn't mean what you thought it did, So these kinds of little sneaky little fucking things, depending on the programming language, depending on the engine you're using, depending on just everything, You just got to learn the shit out of that thing to be able to identify those.
So I think
fast.
you could say that becoming an expert means learning how to become less wrong faster.
Yep.
That's really
or
all it is.
discover your wrongness faster.
How to recover from wrongness faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make you wrong less often, I don't think.
No. In fact, the better you get at something, the faster you move and the faster you get to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And then the faster you learn. It's an accelerating process.
Yep, right.
Yeah. All right. So that's all the time we have. We'd like to thank our producer, Fat Bard, for making us sound good. Thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord and forums running. If you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, hop on into our Discord server, which is at discord.gg/bscotch. We now have 14 million people in there.
Yep.
Approximately.
Give or take. There's a margin of error there.
Well, as with anything, you can never quite know.
You never
how many
can
of a thing.
tell.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it says like 240, but I mean,
That's just an
is it
estimate.
accurate? We don't know. Also, if you'd like to adorn your body with Butterscotch merch, you can check out our shop, which is over at shop.bscotch.net. Or if you'd like to send us something, M&Ms, no live animals, anything like that. We have a mailbox, so you can send that.
Also, no dead
Yeah,
animals.
I was going to add that clarity.
No
weirdos.
animals.
Just no animals.
Yeah.
Nothing that is or was alive.
Except for M&Ms.
Yes.
Free range M&Ms.
They were alive, right?
Yeah, I think so. You gotta pick them off the M&M tree.
So you can find that over at mailbox.bscotch.net. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.